Hello class, I'm going to go over chapter 36 in this short video. So chapter 36, we're going to take a look at small businesses, or rather sole proprietorships, in this first part, and I'll do a second video for franchises. So this is the first of several chapters where we're going to be looking at business entities. For each of these entities, we'll look at how it's formed, how it operates, what liabilities there are, and finally how the entity may terminate or end. So try to keep this life cycle of a business in mind as we go through each of the various business forms. Sorry, let me see if I can change the slide. All right, so keep in mind, these are the 4 considerations that probably go through the mind of an entrepreneur when they are getting started. All right, you may have already read ahead and have already seen this, all right, but we're going to go through these considerations for the sole proprietorship, and then we'll be taking a look at it in the context of a partnership, and then later on the corporation. All right, so what are these 4 considerations? Letter A, how easy, how inexpensive or expensive is it for an entrepreneur to create this business form? All right. Secondly, what sort of liability does an owner have should he or she choose this business form? Letter C, what are the tax considerations that the entrepreneur may face once the entity is operating? And lastly, letter D, how easy or difficult is it for the entrepreneur to raise capital? All right. These are the 3 traditional business forms. I've already mentioned we're looking at sole proprietorship in this chapter, where you have a business owned by a single person or family. In the coming chapter, chapter 37, we'll be looking at the partnership, where the business is owned by 2 or more persons. They make an agreement to own together the business. The third major entity is the corporation, which is a legal entity formed under state law. What happens there is that the ownership by the shareholders is divided from the management role of a board of directors or officers, right? And we'll spend probably a concerted amount of time, at least a couple chapters, on a corporation. All right, now each of these businesses, of course, has its pro and its con, and that's what we'll be looking at. All right, so we'll go to the sole proprietorship. I have it summarized here, the advantages and disadvantages. On the advantage side, first, it is easy and inexpensive to form a sole proprietorship. Doesn't take any type of special filings, and people can just start off conducting their business. Very easy. All right. Second advantage, the owner gets to make all the decisions. He or she has maximum control over the direction of the business. Doesn't have to answer to anybody. Advantage number 3, the owner keeps all the profits. Of course, he or she is the only owner. There's no one to share those profits with. And number 4, the owner may transfer ownership as he or she wants at any time. There are no limitations on that. All right, let's go to the disadvantage side. All right, in terms of disadvantages, the owner has an unlimited personal liability for the losses and the obligations of the business. All right, and when we say personal liability, that means that all of the owner's assets are reachable by any creditor to the sole proprietorship. All right, number 2, second disadvantage, businesses do not survive. A sole proprietorship does not survive the owner's death, meaning that it will have to be completely shut down, okay, before it can be started up again. Now, as a consumer, you may not realize that. If a owner of a business passes, you may not notice any real difference in the conduct of the business, but on paper, all the ownership has to be transferred. The title has to be transferred to a new owner, okay, whether that's a family member or some outsider. right? The business is sold perhaps after the owner dies, right? So the business does not survive the owner's death, right? And then third disadvantage is the owner has a limited ability to raise capital. He or she can go and apply for a loan. The bank may not be as open to lending money to a sole proprietor because they have to depend on that one person for any repayment. All right, I'm going to close out this part 1, and we'll pick up with part 2, franchises.